course the overhead stowage. Now we know the brakes work.
Hello everyone and welcome to the video. Today I will be, or at least will be attempting to, travel solo all by myself for the first time, and we'll be going from Perth to Melbourne this morning for a few days. I'm going there for an event this morning and hopefully we'll be able to make it there on time with all the terrible traffic as you can see, but thankfully I've left a lot of time to get there nice and early. I eventually got to Terminal 2, which I've never flown out of before. It was very small. Luckily they had a few small food options. I was able to get a sandwich. You see the weather wasn't that great. You could see the city a little bit, and there were so many FIFO minions around and some very overpriced drinks. Before long enough, everyone started just randomly queuing up, and boarding was announced sometime after that. We're flying with Jetstar today, Australia's budget carrier, the only budget carrier in Australia, and thankfully I've got a window seat so I can have all those amazing views. Even though I did not book nor pay for this flight, I was very, very fortunate to be able to attend this event. And here we go, we're now boarding the aircraft to go to Melbourne. Right now I'm passing my favourite seat on the whole aircraft, that exit seat with plenty of legroom that I have been fortunate enough to sit in the past. And unfortunately we're on an older aircraft today, an A321, so the legroom is quite limited, especially for me being 195 centimetres. Here's the menu, as I was selected to go on this trip. I also have a $15 meal voucher, and there was a baby that was crying a lot right there, but thankfully that did not last long, and it also did not take long for us to get going. Very quick. The weather wasn't too bad, but as you can see it was a bit windy for that aircraft and had a bit of an unstable approach there, but that's quite typical for Perth. And we started our takeoff roll very, very quickly. We didn't even stop on the runway and were off before long and able to have some fantastic views of the Perth city as we took off. We flew over this mine in Greater Perth I've never seen before, as well as what I believe is Serpentine Dam. I then went to the toilet, and unlike in some other aircraft, I was actually able to fit here properly without my head touching the roof, even though it was pretty close. And then they started the meal service very quickly. I used my voucher to get myself an absolutely delicious hot chocolate, as well as a very good sausage roll and pie, which surprised me for airline food. And before long enough, we were descending into very chilly Melbourne, even though the flight is only about 4 hours. With the time zone difference, it's about 7 hours. So it was early evening by the time we were coming in. And thankfully, we used a very good approach route, so we got some lovely views of Melbourne City, as well as Essendon Airport, that you'll see very shortly. So here we are now in cold and cloudy Melbourne. There's the famous air traffic control tower, as well as a plane going to Dallas, somewhere I'd much rather go than Melbourne, but Melbourne is also my favourite Australian city. Not that I've been to any others apart from my home place of Perth. Here is me navigating through the airport, trying to find my group. It was pretty hard to navigate through as we got a more remote stand because we had to walk and not get a jet bridge, and then you mingle with everyone who's departing and arriving at the same time. But here I am finally in my hotel room, all for me. Look at that. Very nice place indeed, with a lovely bed. The view was left a little bit to be desired, but at least I had a balcony and some light coming in. It was also quite a nice bathroom, but you can tell that the tap is right on the very edge, so that was quite problematic. Here's our flight. Took us only 3 hours today, very quick. I went for the first event, the meetup, and then we went around. There were some markets that were going on, so we took the tram, but here was the queue to get into the market, which was absolutely shocking. There's me poking over the fence. That's what was in the market, so there was no point of even getting through. Most of the group decided to wander around Melbourne, but I decided to have an early night. Got up the next morning, went to the corporate office where I was meant to be, with a very lovely, almost panoramic view of Melbourne, and was giving my input and opinions on things. That went on for most of the day. It did rain a very little bit, and I stopped by Parliament, which was along the route for me to return to my hotel anyway. I chatted with some guy about politics and his whole life for way too long. I really wanted to end that conversation towards the end because I was so tired, but he was very, very passionate, had served our country, so I kept chatting with him, got some nice photos, and eventually headed back to my hotel. But on the way, I stopped at the grocery store and grabbed some water and snacks. The next day, we had some time, so a few of us went and explored the gardens. They had a JFK memorial for literally no reason at all, apart from him being assassinated and wanting to pay their respects. But lovely garden. It was nice and cooler. The day it was a bit warmer in the sun, so it was a nice, refreshing experience to be in the garden. As you can see, it's absolutely beautiful. Something we do not have like this in Perth. We have similar things, but nothing like this. It was a very nice and different experience, especially being right in the centre of the city. Here is some misters going off. I'm not too sure what really that was for, and me trying to get a few nice shots of the surrounding area. Not only are there lovely gardens, there's also a bit of an indoor nursery area, and there's a very nice fountain outside that was nice and cooling because it did actually get quite hot in the sun. There was also this hut home type of build, which I assume has some historical significance. You could pay to enter. There were some people in uniform there, but we were on quite a tight schedule, so we kind of kept walking around. Very nice environment, fountains, trees, flowers. The colours were lovely being there in person. They also had those little house models, and we walked around and headed towards the tram for our next little adventure, which is to the zoo. We weren't going there for very long, but it was still very nice of them to invite us there to go along. Here's a bathroom I could have used along the way, but I decided to give it a pass. And as some people in the group were hungry, we decided to stop by some of the restaurants and cafes. And I was very, very surprised. There was a huge selection, didn't know what that thing was, food choices from all different countries and cultures. And on the way, there was the the State Library. So we took a quick little detour in there. There was so many tourists. It was very interesting how you had so many students and people studying and reading, and a whole bunch of people taking photographs of them. And there was also quite a lot of historical paintings, artworks, just like pieces of evidence, like video recordings, and also some more modern art. Some people would say it's not art. I was very surprised at how lively it was. Like, you don't have this in Perth so much everywhere, but in Melbourne, very lively all over the place. It is a very, very fantastic and beautiful city, but they do have lots of problems due to mismanagement, especially in the crime area nowadays, where everyday citizens are quite concerned. The zoo was, however, no exception to the loveliness of Melbourne. Very lovely. I love the grounds. Look how curated it was. Finally, some palm trees that are nice and neatly trimmed. Don't have any of those in Perth, and they had this beautiful mural. Look at the detail in that. And a nice selection of animals, and also people scuba diving in the enclosures trying to scrape off all the algae. It was surprisingly busy in the zoo, and they had some nice statues as well as one of a monkey, but given my past experience with monkeys, you can check out my whole vlog on that. I decided to stay away even if it was a statue, unless there was a glass barrier between me and the monkey. As you'll see later, they had that palm oil barcode thing, but none of it was working. And here is a monkey that I didn't mind because they are much more friendlier than the Macau monkeys, and there was obviously glass between us. So I kind of used a little bit of thinking. Everyone crowded where the monkey was. I went to the opposite side where the monkey wasn't, and eventually it came round, so I was able to get some very nice shots of the beautiful, beautiful monkey, which was very interactive, and according to some of the staff, it's not normally this interactive, so I guess I was very lucky and of being able to get some very nice close-up shots of the monkey. Like, look at that, you can even see it breathing against the glass.
Hello.
By now, it was already time to go, but I was pretty happy with that. I kind of prioritized what I wanted to see first, got most of that done. Very nice grounds at the zoo in general just to hang out, and I went to bed pretty early, woke up, had another lovely buffet breakfast, and then already it was time for me to leave Melbourne and try their airport experience on the way back, which was pretty efficient. They did have some very good food choices, I do have to admit. There's British Airways, which I haven't seen before, I don't think, and it was interesting. I saw it on the east coast of Australia, got a 50-cent McDonald's ice cream, and thankfully, unlike in Melbourne, the woman, she was wearing a glove in one hand to make the machine work and holding the cone with her bare hand. So after she gave it to me, I just did ask her about that, and she was like, oh, maybe I forgot, which wasn't very much of a good response, was it? And here's our aircraft pulling up a little bit late, and eventually we were going, and I did get told off by someone because apparently you can't be filming on the tarmac. In Australia, they don't like that very much, but in all other countries, they're fine with it, basically. They did close the row behind me down, so I did have to sit next to someone, in the row with someone, but that did mean I could recline freely without bothering anyone, and we were off and going out of Melbourne. Very bumpy taxiways. If you've flown out of Melbourne, you do know how bumpy it gets on the taxiway. But we were off and going back to Perth, and the weather was a bit better than the first day. Got my food again, which was just as good, and there was, I don't know how you meant to use the sink in the toilet, and there was a lovely rainbow welcoming me back to Perth, and the same miner we flew over welcoming me back as well. We must have flown the exact same route when we were coming into land. So there must have been a westerly front happening, because now the bad weather that we had in Melbourne on day one is now in Perth, and then we had this happen on the ground.
Under your seat next to the seat pocket, and of course the overhead stowage. Now we know the brakes work.
And also this. Yes, that was the aircraft refueler for some reason yelling at me not to record. Like I said, they are very strict here. In other parts of the world, you see tourists getting offered photos by sometimes the flight crew in front of the plane. But eventually I was back, and the weather was pretty bad in Perth. And that's the end of this vlog. If you enjoyed watching me survive my first solo trip very successfully, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and I really do hope to see you in the next video. Bye guys.